There are moments in public life when a smile stops being just a smile. It becomes a performance, a shield, and sometimes a quiet cry for help that almost no one notices in real time. Kelly Clarkson spent years in that space, standing in front of cameras, in front of audiences, in front of the world, while something deeply personal was slowly unraveling behind the scenes. To most people, she was the same Kelly Clarkson who rose from a small town dreamer to a global voice after American Idol. Warm, funny, emotionally open, and impossibly talented, she sang heartbreak like she had invented it, but always with a sense of strength underneath it all. What people didn't see was how closely her art began to mirror her private life. This is not just a story about fame, or divorce, or celebrity relationships. It's about identity loss, emotional survival, and what happens when the structure of someone's entire life quietly collapses, while they are still expected to perform at full volume. It's about how someone keeps showing up when everything familiar has already started to disappear. And alongside, her story runs parallel lives other artists, other heartbreaks, other forms of rebuilding. Some people found healing together, others had to learn how to survive alone. The contrast is what makes the story heavier and also what makes it human. Because in the end, this isn't just about who left whom, or who ended up with who. It's about what it takes to remain standing when the version of your life you believed in no longer exists. The quiet break, and no one saw coming. It didn't start with headlines, it started with silence. In 2019, behind closed doors, Kelly Clarkson's marriage was already shifting into something unfamiliar. There were no dramatic public explosions, no viral arguments, no visible collapse. Instead, there was distance that grew slowly, almost imperceptibly, until it filled every space where connection used to be. She was still working, still filming, still smiling for audiences, but at home, things felt different. Conversations became shorter. Energy between two people who once built a shared life began to fade into routine logistics instead of emotional presence. What made it more complicated was how intertwined everything had become. Her husband wasn't just her partner in life, he was also involved in her career, her management, her decisions, her financial structure. When a relationship like that begins to fracture, it doesn't just affect emotions, it affects architecture. The entire framework of daily life becomes something that needs to be untangled piece by piece. And that's the part most people never see. The emotional weight of trying to understand where love ends and life logistics begin. When silence replaces communication, it doesn't feel peaceful. It feels like something is already over, even if no one has said it out loud yet. For Kelly, that quiet period wasn't dramatic. It was disorienting, the kind of emotional confusion where nothing is officially broken, but nothing feels intact anymore either. And in that space, the future begins to shift long before anyone acknowledges it. The end that became public when the separation became public in 2020. It wasn't surprising to those who had been watching closely, but it still carried weight. Divorce is never just a legal event when a life has been built so deeply together. It is a slow dismantling of shared identity. The filings brought structure to what had already emotionally unraveled. Custody discussions, financial negotiations, and legal boundaries turned a private heartbreak into a public narrative. Suddenly, what had been quiet became something discussed across media platforms, analyzed and judged from a distance. For Kelly Clarkson, the hardest part wasn't public attention, it was the internal contradiction. She had built her entire belief system around stability, commitment, and permanence. She had believed in forever, not as a concept, but as a foundation. When that foundation broke, it didn't just create sadness. It created disorientation, the kind that makes someone question not just the relationship, but their own judgment, their own memory of what was real. She didn't frame it publicly as anger. She didn't turn it into spectacle. Instead, she kept working. That decision mattered more than people realized at the time. Because continuing to show up while emotionally collapsing privately requires a level of discipline that is almost invisible from the outside. And as her voice continued to appear on television screens every day, something subtle began to shift. Fans didn't always know what they were noticing, but they felt it. The tone changed, the emotional weight behind familiar warmth became slightly heavier. Still, she stayed. Still, she performed. Still, she carried on. Even when her personal world no longer looked like something she recognized. 3. Parallel pain. Blake Shelton's earlier collapse while Kelly was entering her period of emotional unraveling. Another public figure had already lived through a similar collapse years earlier. Blake Shelton's divorce from Miranda Lambert in 2015 came as a shock to fans who had seen them as one of country music's defining couples. Their public presence was effortless shared stages, shared success, shared identity. When it ended, it didn't just break a relationship. It shattered an image. For Blake, the aftermath was messy and deeply personal. He has spoken in interviews about hitting emotional lows, about feeling disoriented, about numbing himself just to get through the day. When a relationship becomes your identity for years, losing it doesn't just feel like heartbreak. It feels like losing your internal reference point. What makes his story important in this larger narrative is not comparison, but recognition. When someone has lived through that kind of emotional collapse, they begin to recognize it in others even when nothing is being said directly. Blake's later connection with Kelly Clarkson came from shared professional space, but emotionally, there was an unspoken understanding between them. Not romantic, not dramatic, just recognition of what it means to stand in public while privately falling apart. And that kind of recognition doesn't fix anything, but it does make isolation slightly less absolute. Because sometimes the most meaningful human connection in moments of pain is not rescue. It is being seen without explanation. 4. Gwen Stefani and the idea of rebuilding together at the same time. Gwen Stefani was navigating her own emotional collapse after her marriage to Gavin Rossdale ended. After more than a decade together and 3 children, the separation came with deep emotional impact and public attention. Her music during that period reflected more than artistry. It reflected processing. Songs written during that time carried emotional weight that was impossible to separate from real-life experience. When she joined The Voice, she entered a professional environment while still emotionally rebuilding. And it was there she met Blake Shelton, who was also in his own post-divorce chapter. What unfolded between them wasn't instant healing or romantic convenience. It was gradual understanding between 2 people who had both already been broken in very public ways. They didn't meet at their strongest points, they met at their most uncertain. Over time, that shared understanding turned into something stable. Not because it erased the past, but because it allowed both of them to exist without pretending they hadn't been wounded. Their eventual marriage became a symbol of rebuilding, but not in a fairy tale sense. It was more grounded than that. It was about choosing connection again after loss had already rewritten expectations. This matters in contrast to Kelly Clarkson's path because it highlights something essential. Not all healing follows the same structure. Some people rebuild through partnership, others rebuild without it. Neither path is simple, neither path is guaranteed. 5. Carrying a career while falling apart during the most difficult phase of her personal life. Kelly Clarkson was also building something new professionally, her daytime talk show. On camera, she was everything audiences expected: funny, engaging, emotionally generous, musically gifted. The show became a space where she performed not just as a host, but as a presence people trusted. What viewers didn't always see was the emotional duality of that time. Going on stage every day while privately dealing with emotional instability creates a split existence. One version of you is composed and present. The other is exhausted from maintaining that composition. Her musical segments became especially meaningful. When she performed covers, they often carried emotional reinterpretations that fans connected to her personal life, even when she didn't explicitly frame them that way. That's what made her presence unique. She didn't separate performance from feeling. Even when she wasn't speaking directly about her life, her voice carried what words didn't. At home, however, things were still in transition. A marriage dissolving quietly, legal processes unfolding slowly, and emotional exhaustion building underneath professional responsibility. It created a situation where she was publicly stable and privately unsteady, and maintaining that balance required a level of endurance that is rarely acknowledged in celebrity narratives, because showing up is one thing. Showing up while falling apart is something entirely different. 6. Legal pressure and emotional weight as the divorce proceedings progressed. Financial and legal discussions became part of Kelly Clarkson's daily reality. Reports of significant financial obligations and custody arrangements turned private decisions into public conversation. But beyond numbers and headlines, what mattered most was emotional impact. Legal systems reduce relationships into structure, but emotionally, nothing about those relationships feels reduced. At the same time, she remained committed to protecting her children from public conflict. That choice shaped how she engaged publicly, measured, careful, and restrained. What made this period particularly difficult was the imbalance between public perception and private experience. From the outside, she was a successful television host and global star. From the inside, she was navigating one of the most emotionally demanding transitions of her life. The ranch, the family structure, the routines, all of it had to be redefined while still maintaining public visibility. And yet, despite frustration that could have easily turned into public conflict, she chose not to engage in public retaliation. That restraint became one of the most defining aspects of her character during this time. Because sometimes strength is not what is said. Sometimes it is what is deliberately not said. 7. Love rebuilt in another story while Kelly Clarkson was navigating legal and emotional restructuring. Blake Shelton and Gwen Stefani were building a new chapter together. Their relationship evolved slowly from shared understanding into partnership and eventually into marriage. It wasn't framed as escape from past pain, but as a continuation of lives already reshaped by it. Their wedding in 2021 symbolized more than celebration. It symbolized stability after disruption, a decision to commit again after both had already experienced loss. What makes their story relevant here is not contrast for comparison, but contrast for understanding. It shows one possible outcome of shared healing, but it is not a universal outcome. Because while some people rebuild through partnership, others are still in the process of rebuilding themselves. And timing is never symmetrical in emotional recovery. Kelly Clarkson's life was not aligned with that same timeline. And that difference matters more than it appears on the surface, because healing does not operate on parallel schedules. 8. Music as emotional survival. One of the most defining aspects of Kelly Clarkson's journey has always been music. During her most emotionally difficult period, her performances took on new meaning, not because the songs changed, but because she did. Songs she had sung years earlier began to sound different when filtered through lived experience. Piece by piece, in particular, became a moment of emotional visibility. Performances of that song often carried visible emotion, not as performance technique, but as lived memory resurfacing in real time. Audiences responded because authenticity is difficult to manufacture. When emotion is real, it disrupts the boundary between performer and listener. Her talk show became an extension of that same emotional transparency. Music was no longer separate from life. It became a way of processing life in public view. And that created a unique relationship with audiences. People didn't just watch her perform, they watched her endure. That distinction is subtle but important. Performance suggests distance, endurance suggests presence, and Kelly Clarkson, during this time, was not distant from her material. She was inside it, 9. Rebuilding in a new environment eventually, change became necessary not just emotionally, but physically. Moving her show from Los Angeles to New York marked a significant shift in environment and mindset. Relocation was not just logistical. It represented separation from memory, a way to create space between past identity and present reality. Alongside this shift, her personal health journey became a turning point, not as aesthetic transformation, but as a response to medical reality and personal responsibility. It reframed health as sustainability rather than appearance. But more important than external change was internal shift. She began speaking about forgiveness, particularly self-forgiveness, letting go of internal blame, questioning, and emotional self-judgment that had accumulated over years. That process is not dramatic, it is gradual. It is the slow dismantling of internal narratives that no longer serve survival. And over time, something changed in how she carried herself publicly. Not perfection, not resolution, but ease. A reduction in emotional weight, which in many ways is what healing actually looks like. Not transformation into someone new, but return to someone unburdened. 10. Two paths of healing when viewed side by side. These stories reveal something important about emotional recovery. Blake Shelton and Gwen Stefani rebuilt through partnership. They found stability in shared experience, mutual understanding, and renewed trust in connection. Kelly Clarkson rebuilt differently. Her path was more internal, more solitary, and in many ways less visible in terms of traditional narrative resolution. Neither path is superior. They simply reflect different timing, different circumstances, and different emotional needs. What stands out most is not who ended up where, but how each person responded to loss. Some turn outward toward connection. Others turn inward toward reconstruction. Kelly Clarkson's journey is particularly powerful because it does not rely on external completion. There is no narrative requirement that someone else arrive to make it whole. Instead, it becomes a story of self-containment, of learning to exist without emotional outsourcing, of becoming stable without external validation. And that kind of stability is often quieter, less visible, less narratively satisfying in traditional storytelling, but arguably more foundational. Outro: what remains when everything else changes in the end? What remains of these intertwined stories is not celebrity drama or public relationships. It is something more universal. People lose love, people rebuild. Some rebuild together, some rebuild alone. Some rebuild slowly while still appearing strong on the outside. Kelly Clarkson's story is not about winning or losing. It is about endurance through emotional disassembly and the gradual return to self. There is no final chapter where everything becomes perfect. There is only the present moment where someone decides to continue. And perhaps that is what makes her journey resonate so widely. Because beneath fame, music, and television, the core experience is recognizable. The moment when the life you expected no longer exists, and you have to decide what kind of person you become next. And in that space, without applause or audience certainty, she kept going, not as a symbol, not as a storyline, but as a person learning, slowly, how to remain herself.